For more than a century, Northern Californians have relied on local newspapers, radio, and television stations to inform, to educate, and to entertain.
We are bringing you early election returns. North Atlantic states give a substantial lead to Warren Harding over James Cox.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Standard Hour, presented for your enjoyment by the Standard Oil Company of California.
Hello, Tea Pickers. Happy 84th birthday to Mrs. Gippy Williams in Bagwell, Texas.
It's 6 o'clock. Time for Shell News, with world news headlines and film and live coverage of local events. And here is your Shell News reporter, Tom Franklin.
Good evening, everybody, and greetings from your neighborhood Shell dealer.
We all share common memories of the words, sounds, and images of events that impacted our lives.
This is Channel 2.
From Jonestown, Guyana tonight, we have the first videotape of the massive suicide you've heard and read about for the last 2 nights. The pictures you're about to see were taken by an NBC crew, the only television crew allowed to visit Jonestown. Fred Franklin.
As president of the Board of Supervisors, it's my duty to make this announcement. Both Mayor Moscone and Supervisor Harvey Milk have been shot and killed.
Jesus Christ!
The suspect is Supervisor Dan White.
You may have noticed our power was knocked out just as some of the pre-game activities for the World Series was getting underway. That game is scheduled to start any moment now. A major earthquake, an earthquake which was felt from Oakland to Sacramento, as far south as Los Angeles. We have reports of major power outages.
Cheryl, obviously people are terribly nervous here. The power is off in Candlestick Park.
Everything on this hillside is gone. A lot of these houses had views of the bay in San Francisco. No more. It looks as though a nuclear bomb went off in this area. Down below us in the gully, there are some houses that are still standing, but by and large, this place is just devastated. Driving through here is like driving through a graveyard, because all these chimneys actually look like tombstones that are marking the loss of family belongings.
Many of us think of these treasures as a permanent record for posterity. But in reality, without help, many rare radio and television recordings will not survive. The original recordings are fragile, sensitive to temperature changes, dust, and dirt. They become brittle and deteriorate over time. They must be stored correctly and cared for properly. Over the years, many irreplaceable radio recordings and television film and videotape masters have become damaged, misplaced, or in many cases, lost permanently. Scripts, memorabilia, props, and equipment of significant historical value have also disappeared. Newspaper accounts of dramatic news events and biographical records of the pioneers of print have been lost, haphazardly stored away in cardboard boxes or consigned to dusty shelves. Preserving these artifacts requires recognition of their importance and a commitment of resources. As of now, a central repository for radio, television, and print media archives does not exist in Northern California. To preserve our legacy, the San Francisco Northern California chapter of the National Television Academy and the Northern California chapter of the Society of Professional Journalists have established a dynamic consortium made up of regional media organizations and corporations, professional associations, industry leaders, and educators. Together, this collaborative partnership is developing the Media Museum of Northern California. Initially an online effort, it is the only museum in Northern California dedicated exclusively to regional radio, television, and print media, and one of only 4 major broadcast museums in the entire country. The goals of the online museum are to collect, catalog, and preserve Northern California newspaper, television, and radio stories, scripts, and programming of artistic, cultural, and historic significance, and to make the collection available digitally. To exhibit images of historic newspaper, television, and radio broadcast equipment and memorabilia. to present public screenings, seminars, and educational workshops, to serve as a teaching center for broadcast audio and video preservation, media literacy, and other educational programs. On behalf of the museum, the San Francisco Northern California chapter of the National Television Academy has already begun documenting the oral histories of those who have made significant contributions to the region's rich broadcast history.
They had a dress code that we had to adhere by. I even wore white shoes to work every single day because I wore white shoes all the time. And but you felt important like that.
Hi, Captain Satellite.
My show was the first show that McDonald's used to advertise in Northern California. And I made some personal appearances at McDonald's stores, and thousands of kids would come. They were mightily impressed. Matter of fact, one of the great goofs of my life was they were so impressed with Captain Satellite and how he could draw people, they offered me a free franchise. A free McDonald's franchise. Can you imagine that? And I said, come on, I'm in show business. I don't sell hamburgers.
The California Press Association and the California Newspaper Publishers Association have mounted a campaign to save the newspaper morgues and their pioneering coverage from the gold rush to the present. Founded in 1878 at the Palace Hotel in San Francisco, Cal Press has produced a trove of historical material, including profiles of newspaper people elected over decades to its legendary California Newspaper Hall of Fame. San Francisco is the ideal place to undertake this project. The Bay Area is home to the greatest concentration of radio and television stations, the most competitive newspaper market, and many of the most cutting-edge media and media technology companies in the entire country. The city's impressive market position is surpassed only by its rich history. The San Francisco Bay Area produced many colorful pioneers of the early broadcast and print eras. Before statehood, newspapers were making their mark. The Californian hit the streets in 1846, the beginning of an often raucous era of print journalism. On May 14, 1856, San Francisco Bulletin editor James King of William was shot and killed by a competing editor, James Casey of the Sunday Times. King had written that Casey had been an inmate of Sing Sing prison in New York, which everyone in town already knew. When the fire company bell tolled King's death, the Vigilance Committee hung Casey and left his body hanging for days as a warning against further terrorism. In 1865, the San Francisco Chronicle and the San Francisco Examiner were founded, starting a news battle that lasted until the Hearst family bought the Chronicle in 2000. On April 15, 1865, Michael DeYoung, co-founder with his brother Charles of the Daily Dramatic Chronicle, strolled into the city's telegraph office and got a sensational scoop. President Lincoln had been assassinated, and the DeYoung boys put out an extra with a several hundred-word story and a sketch of the president. In 1887, Examiner owner Senator George Hearst turned the newspaper over to his 24-year-old son, William Randolph Hearst. With vision and millions in Hearst mining money, young Hearst built the Examiner into a multi-billion-dollar media empire and put the Hearst stamp indelibly on American journalism. Hearst was immortalized in the movie Citizen Kane. San Francisco's papers attracted a blaze of creative talent: Mark Twain, Bret Hart, Henry George, Jack London, muckraker Frank Norris, and pioneer poet laureate Ina Coolbrith, just to name a few. Well into the 20th century, Northern California newspapers produced iconic figures such as Herb Caen. Outside the mainstream, papers such as the Berkeley Barb and San Francisco Bay Guardian broke news and changed the tone of journalism forever. In 1912, Charles Doc Harold began his weekly experimental radio broadcasts of music and news from San Jose. Originally identified simply as the Herald Station, it eventually moved to San Francisco and took the call letters KCBS. In April 1920, inventor Lee DeForest, with a 500-watt transmitter, put San Francisco station 6XC on the air. DeForest's radio station began operating 6 months before KDKA in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, which nevertheless was proclaimed the first commercial radio station in the United States. In 1927, 21-year-old inventor Philo T. Farnsworth transmitted the first television broadcast from a laboratory in San Francisco's North Beach, now a registered historical landmark. Farnsworth called it electric television. In 1956, 23-year-old inventor Ray Dolby was a key member of Redwood City's Ampex engineering team that invented the first practical videotape recorder. On November 30th of that year, CBS Television used the machine for the first videotape-delayed network broadcast. Ray Dolby went on to found the San Francisco-based company that bears his famous name. The first century was merely a preview of the creative, literary, journalistic, and technical advances that continue to unfold across Northern California. By the 1970s, the underpinnings of the Internet were being developed by Vint Cerf at Stanford University's Digital Systems Laboratory and Bob Kahn at what would become the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. Within a few decades, newspapers were no longer merely newspapers. They were on the way to delivering the news electronically. So too were television stations breaking out of the rectangular box to become multimedia sites. As the 21st century unfolded, news media were redefining themselves with podcasts, video on demand, tweets, smartphone apps, and the new form of friendship embodied by Facebook. Here at the Media Museum of Northern California, we offer a virtual glimpse of this rich history and the remarkable personalities that made all of this possible. Enjoy your tour.